When researching the Torah, many go down the path of Jewish tradition. But Jewish tradition is just that, Jewish tradition, not the Torah. This is Off the Cuff, and I'm Steve from TorahFamily.org. Let's talk about it. Today we're continuing our teaching series, Torah 101, a series covering topics that give the basics in how we can all pursue the Torah as given by God, Yahweh. This series is for those new to the Torah, or even sharing with those who may be interested in learning why we should still be pursuing the Torah. As we all learn and grow in the Word, we find ourselves having to set some things to the side, things we were taught to believe was true. This is one of the hardest things to do. Why? Because it forces us to admit we were wrong on something which we thought we knew was true. And the same is true when looking into the Torah, something most all of us was taught was done away with. But when we look a little harder, well, we start seeing how that really doesn't line up as we were taught. However, when one begins looking into the Torah, they find many others refer to it as, or simply with, Jewish tradition, or what some call the Jewish law. But that's very misleading. Simply stated, the Torah is the instructions given by God, Yahweh, as seen through Moses. Jewish tradition and law, on the other hand, came much later. And I believe it's important to note, not all tradition is bad. We just need to remember that it's tradition and not something Yahweh commands. However, Jewish tradition, or Jewish law, is where the waters seem to get cloudy. Some today assume Jewish law and the Torah are one and the same, but they're distinctly different. Jewish law mainly stems from the Talmud. Now, there are actually two different Talmuds. The Jerusalem Talmud, which is believed to be written around the 4th and 5th century. And then we have the Babylonian Talmud, which is believed to have been written around the 6th century. To keep it simple, both of these Talmuds are compilations of oral traditions and laws, along with rabbinic interpretations of laws. But here's the thing. Yeshua opposed those who held to the Jewish traditions passed down instead of the Torah. We see it in Mark chapter 7. Mark chapter 7, starting in verse 6. He replied, Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you hypocrites. As it is written, these people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They worship me in vain. Their teachings are but rules taught by men. You have let go of the commands of God and are holding on to the traditions of men. And he said to them, you have a fine way of setting aside the commands of God in order to observe your own traditions. And then verse 13. Thus you nullify the word of God by your tradition that you have handed down, and you do many things like that. Sadly, this is still the case to this very day. While their intention is good, they place equal and sometimes greater value on that which was passed down to them, just like they did during the days of Yeshua. A problem that arises from this is when an everyday churchgoer hears any of the added laws of the Jews, they simply assume it's part of the Torah. Things like a Sabbath day's journey. Now, there's no such thing as a Sabbath day's journey in the Torah. It was a set distance that was added by Jewish leadership to direct people how far they could walk on the Sabbath. While it was often used as a reference for a specific distance, as seen here in Acts chapter 1, verse 12, you'll never find it in the Torah. And then there's the Seder supper in place of the Passover meal. While many associate the Seder supper as the Passover meal, the Seder supper has added traditions believed to have come from the Jews when they observed Passover while in Babylon during their 70-year banishment. But again, It's not the Passover. While it's observed at the same time of the Passover, it contains the added traditions not given in the Torah. And then there's how to build a sukkah. Jewish tradition gives several different ways in how to build a sukkah for the Feast of Tabernacles, or Sukkot. However, the Torah gives no specifics on how you should make your sukkah. In the English, sukkah simply means booth or tent. It's simply a temporary dwelling. But again, the Torah gives no specifics for them. The point is to live in a temporary dwelling for 7 days to remind us of how the Hebrews lived during the days after they left Egypt. And then there's lighting candles on the Sabbath. In many Jewish circles, the custom of lighting candles on the Sabbath is a staunch tradition. Now, while I believe most, if not all, would confess it's not commanded in the Torah, the practice is adhered to quite faithfully by some. Like the other things listed here, that causes many to assume it's actually part of the instructions given in the Torah. And then there's the 613 laws. However, when one looks into those 613 commands, you find there aren't 613. For example, from Chabad.org, we see the 11th command is to emulate his ways. Sounds good, right? The verse it gives is Deuteronomy 28, verse 9. It reads, Yahweh will establish you as his holy people, as he promised you on oath, if you keep the commands of Yahweh your God and walk in his ways. Now, the problem is, this is not a command. It's actually a promise if we keep his commands. So, what the Jews say is the 11th command is not a command at all. Let's look at another one. Number 25. Not to follow the whims of your heart or what your eyes see. Again, it sounds good. The verse it gives is Numbers 15:39. Let's read it. You will have these tassels to look at, and so you will remember all the commands of Yahweh, that you may obey them, and not prostitute yourselves by going after the lusts of your own hearts and eyes. Then you will remember to obey all my commands, and will be consecrated to your God. Now, is this a command to not follow the whims of your heart or what your eyes see? No. It's actually giving you the desired result if you obey the verses in front of these verses. The previous verses read, Numbers chapter 15, verse 37. Yahweh said to Moses, Speak to the Israelites and say to them, Throughout the generations to come, you are to make tassels on the corners of your garments, with a blue cord on each tassel. Now, this is an instruction to follow. It's actually given as the 84th command in the 613, the command of tzitzit, tassels, and it gives the correct verse. However, the 25th command of the 613 isn't a command at all. Again, it's simply showing the desired result from obeying the command of wearing tzitzit. So just by these two examples, we see the 613 commands really aren't 613. That's the traditional rendering from the Jewish tradition. However, these 613 commands is what many call the law of God, or the law of Moses. And that's where the confusion comes. But many look to the Jewish interpretation of things instead of looking to the scriptures for themselves. We aren't to add or take away from the Torah, seen here in Deuteronomy chapter 4 and chapter 12. But that's just what the Jewish law has done. They've added to the Torah. However, the modern church has broken this command as well. Their traditions passed down have taken away from the Torah, completely ignoring the words of Isaiah that says the Word of God stands forever, and how Peter even quoted those very words of Isaiah. So, the modern church and Jewish tradition has broken this command given in Deuteronomy chapter 4 and chapter 12. Many Jewish laws were added to keep from breaking the Torah. That sounds like a good thing, I know. However, over time, their added instructions became equal to, and for some, greater than the Torah. One of the first times we see this happen is in the book of Nehemiah, the time when the Jews were coming back into the land from their 70-year captivity in Babylon. They started breaking the Sabbath, and Nehemiah was infuriated at them because they were falling into the same patterns of their fathers that got them banished in the first place. So what did Nehemiah do? He started having the gates to Jerusalem locked during the Sabbath to keep the people from breaking it. The story is all here in Nehemiah chapter 13, verses 15 through 22. Right here we see how Nehemiah commanded the gates to be shut on Friday evening through Saturday night so they wouldn't break the Sabbath. An added command. A good idea, yes, but it's not commanded in the Torah. The Torah should have been enough. The people simply should have obeyed. As it is, they kept adding new commands like this one to keep from breaking the Torah. Then, these new added commands became equal to the Torah. And this explains what we see by Jewish leadership in Yeshua's day, some 500 years later, with all the added commands. So, they came through good motive, yes, but they ended up elevating these new commands equal to the Torah, thus adding to the Torah and breaking Deuteronomy chapter 4 and chapter 12. But not only did the Jews add to the Torah to make their own law, within these added laws, they say the Torah is only for them, only for them. And many Christians believe this. Ironically, we see this also came from the book of Nehemiah as well. Please consider Nehemiah chapter 13, starting in verse 1. On that day, the book of Moses was read aloud in the hearing of the people, and there it was found written that no Ammonite or Moabite should ever be admitted into the assembly of God, because they had not met the Israelites with food and water, but had hired Balaam to call a curse down on them. Our God, however, turned the curse into a blessing. Now this command they were reading is found in Deuteronomy chapter 23. For 10 generations there was to be no Ammonite or Moabite or any of their descendants enter the assembly of Yahweh. But now look at the Jews' response to this specific law. Verse 3. When the people heard this law, they excluded from Israel all who were of foreign descent. They removed all foreigners from the assembly. But that wasn't the command. The command was to prohibit 10 generations of any Moabite or Ammonite or any of their descendants from the assembly, not all foreigners. But this was their mindset moving forward. And this is why we see the Jews wouldn't allow foreigners in the temple courts during the first century. This is seen here in Acts chapter 21, verses 27 through 29. But the scriptures are very clear in this. Numbers chapter 15, verse 13. Everyone who is native born must do these things in this way when he brings an offering made by fire as an aroma pleasing to Yahweh. Many stop right here and say, see, here it is. It's for them only. But let's continue reading. Verse 14. For the generations to come, whenever an alien or anyone else living among you presents an offering made by fire as an aroma pleasing to Yahweh, he must do exactly as you do. The community is to have the same rules for you and for the alien living among you. This is a lasting ordinance for the generations to come. You and the alien shall be the same before Yahweh. The same laws and regulations will apply both to you and to the alien living among you. And then we have Isaiah. Isaiah chapter 56, starting in verse 3. Let no foreigner who has bound himself to Yahweh say, Yahweh will surely exclude me from his people. And let not any eunuch complain, I am only a dry tree. Sadly, many Christians today who call upon Yahweh believe they're separate at the same time. But this verse specifically says not to believe that. If only Christians today would understand this verse. The following verses show how all who claim to be in His covenant are to obey His commands. Continuing, verse 4. For this is what Yahweh says, to the eunuchs who keep my Sabbaths, who choose what pleases me, and hold fast to my covenant. To them I will give within my temple and its walls a memorial, and a name better than sons and daughters. I will give them an everlasting name that will not be cut off. And foreigners who bind themselves to Yahweh to serve Him, to love the name of Yahweh, and to worship Him, all who keep the Sabbath without desecrating it, and who hold fast to my covenant, these I will bring to my holy mountain, and give them joy in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and sacrifices will be accepted on my altar, for my house will be called a house of prayer for all nations. Sovereign Yahweh declares, He who gathers the exiles of Israel, I will gather still others to them besides those already gathered. Come, all you beasts of the field, come and devour, all you beasts of the forest. Now the word for devour here simply means to eat, meaning to eat at the table of Yahweh. This exact same word is also used here, spoken by Uriah to King David in 2 Samuel chapter 11, verse 11. And it's the same word used here in 1 Samuel chapter 2, verse 36. And it's the same word used here in Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 7. And the same word used here in Job chapter 1, verse 4. Verse 9 here in Isaiah 56 is simply the invitation to the others, the foreigners, those of the nations, the Gentiles, referenced as beasts. Now, why are they referenced as beasts? This goes right in line with Hosea chapter 2, where Yahweh makes the new covenant with the beasts of the field, which also goes in perfect parallel with Peter's vision in Acts chapter 10, seeing all the unclean animals in the sheet, which was all about the Gentiles being accepted by Yahweh, confirming the Torah is for all. Thus, those who choose Yeshua are grafted into Israel, where we are all the same, as noted here by Paul in Romans chapter 10, verse 12, and Colossians chapter 3, verse 11. In these verses, Paul was directly referencing Numbers chapter 15, verses 15 and 16, where it says we are all the same in Yahweh, and we are all to pursue His commands. But just like in the days of Nehemiah, all the way through the first century, the Jews today are bent on keeping all Gentiles bound to the Noahide laws and not allowing them to pursue the Torah. If you're interested in this, you can see more with our teaching simply titled, Beware of the Noahide Laws. Thus, we see the enemy pursuing all who hold to the testimony of Yeshua and keep the Torah in Revelation chapter 12, verse 17, and Revelation 14, verse 12. Remember, Yeshua never opposed the Torah. Never. However, He constantly opposed the Jewish traditions that became what first century Jewish leadership enforced as law. Yeshua made it clear to His followers in Matthew chapter 23, verses 1 through 3, to obey the teachers of the law because they teach Moses, but not to do what they do. Why? Because they didn't follow the law that Moses gave. They followed their own man-made rules. So they taught Moses, but didn't follow Moses. Thus, Yeshua's accusation against them in calling them hypocrites in the rest of Matthew 23. And just as Yeshua commanded His followers to obey Moses, He commanded them here in Matthew 28, verses 19 and 20, to go and teach the nations, the Gentiles, to obey everything he commanded them. And that includes following Moses. So be careful with what some call Torah. The Torah is the instructions given by Yahweh through Moses. That's what Yeshua told us to follow. But the Torah is not and does not consist of writings from the Jewish Talmud. Many don't distinguish between what the scriptures say and the teachings that have been passed down about them. Following the teachings of man can be a dangerous thing. While they may believe they're doing the right thing in what they're teaching, because they don't distinguish between what the Word is and what is taught about the Word, they could actually be endorsing the exact opposite of what the Scriptures say. Well, that's all I have. Think about it. Pray about it. But more than anything, be a doer of the Word and not a hearer only. Until next time, Shalom.